Hello, I'm Edward October. Over the years, I've narrated more ghost stories, horror shows, and creepypastas than I can count. And yet, the crimes discussed on our true crime podcast managed to scare the shit out of me. This program is not suitable for children or the faint of heart. If you are such a person, go ahead and switch off this podcast. Listen to something else. Are you still with us? Well, we've warned you.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, Cam, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well myself.
Yeah, I'm a little sad.
Summer's about to end.
It is.
I know.
Go back to work.
I know.
Like the rest of the world.
I know. I'm kind of looking forward to it. My oldest starts college.
Oh.
And then my youngest is in her junior year. And it's just an exciting time, you know?
It is. To be young again. I always
know.
say, I wish I was that age with what I know now. Do you know how powerful I'd be? It'd be amazing. Just saying.
You just know a little bit more than you did then.
Just a tad bit. Speaking of power, I have a case for you today. Woo.
All right.
It's kind of a two-parter. Not really, but there's two parts to it. You'll see. But here we go. You ready?
It's a two-parter, but it's not.
It isn't, but they're connected. But you'll see when we get there.
Okay.
It is just after 10:30 p.m. on June 3rd, 1999, and we are going to 23-year-old Bobby Bornt's home in Perry, Oklahoma. Now, he's asleep on the couch, and his 9-month-old baby boy sleeps in the nearby room. Suddenly, a loud noise startles him awake. 3 men enter the house after kicking in the front door. The 3 strangers beat Bobby brutally, but not all were strangers. Bobby recognized 23-year-old Clayton Locket as the tattoo artist who had recently done some artwork on him. The other 2 men were 26-year-old Shawn Mathis and Clayton's 17-year-old cousin, Alfonzo Lockett. Clayton wielded a shotgun, which he used to strike Bobby repeatedly. After the brutal beating, the attackers bound Bobby's hands behind his back with duct tape, gagged him, and left him on the couch. They then proceeded to ransack the house in search of drugs. What started out as a teach him a lesson kind of thing would end with the vicious murder on not just this warm June night, but yet another murder in 2014, in which some experts would deem the most inhumane of all. Steve and Susie Neiman, high school sweethearts, have called Perry home for many years. The couple now have a recent high school graduate, 19-year-old Stephanie, and she's an only child. Stephanie, always a hard worker and a great kid, wanted a vehicle of her own. So her parents told her, hey, we're going to let you get a truck as long as you help out with the insurance. Stephanie, needless to say, was thrilled. One of Stephanie's friends was a young married mother, 23-year-old Summer Hare. When Stephanie leaves for an extra work shift late one evening, she runs into Summer, who's crying. She tells Stephanie that she and her husband had gotten into a big fight, and she asked Stephanie to give her a ride to her friend Bobby Bornt's house. Initially, Stephanie says, I can't. I gotta work. But then Summer begs, so Stephanie relents and she agrees. The women drive to Bobby's. When they get there, he may be home and he may not, because Summer then informs Stephanie, you know what? I didn't call him prior to being driven out here, so I'm not even sure if he's home. Summer asked Stephanie, hey, can you stay in the car? I'm going to run up there and make sure he's home, and then you can go ahead and leave. Stephanie agrees, but reminds her that she has to work, so she needs to hurry up. Summer made her way up to the house, and Stephanie waited for the all clear to leave. Stephanie could not know at this moment that she was about to enter a hellish situation. As Bobby was confined on the couch, his friend Summer approached the door that was slightly open. Once inside the home, she was struck in the face and knocked to the ground. With the gun to her head, she was told to go out and get Stephanie and make her come inside the home. You know, Jen, leave no witnesses. Mm-hmm. Just like Summer, once inside the house, Stephanie was struck in the head as well. Stephanie tried to resist being duct taped up, but that only led to more hits. Finally, she allowed her wrist to be tied up as the three men continued their torture, all the while demanding to know where Bobby kept the weed, kept the drugs. Where's the drugs? Where's the drugs? The men forced all three of them into the back bedroom as they started to steal stuff from the home, things that they could easily sell. Then Alfonzo took Summer into the bathroom, where she was forced to perform oral sex on him. He then took her into the other bedroom, where he told her to get undressed, and then he raped her. When he was finished, he left her in there, and the other Lockett entered the bedroom. He raped her vaginally and anally, and then made her perform other sexual acts on him. When he finished, he told her to get dressed, and she returned to the bedroom where the others were. After an hour had passed, Summer emerged from the bedroom. It was clear that Clayton was the one in charge, and what he said went. When Clayton told the other two men that they were going to have to kill them all, Mathis protested. But, with Clayton always in charge, he soon would give in. After the men repeatedly abused Summer, the two women were restrained just like Bobby, and the attackers used Stephanie's truck to transport them as Clayton led the way, leaving Perry and driving to Kay County, where he found a desolate spot off a country road. All of them were forced out of the vehicles. At this point, outside the vehicles, Alonzo approached Clayton, and he told him that he didn't think that they should kill them. But, after all, Clayton was the one in charge. Clayton forced Summer to exit the truck and accompany him to a ditch, where he raped her and forced her to perform oral sex on him yet again. When he was finished, he took her back to the pickup. While Summer was sitting in the pickup, Mathis got Summer back out and took her back to Stephanie's truck, where he made her perform oral sex on him. He grabbed her head and said, "For you to live, this is what you have to do." All the victims were then unloaded from the vehicles. When Clayton demanded Stephanie surrender her truck keys and provide the alarm code to him, Stephanie refused. At this point, Clayton Locket instructed Mathis to retrieve a shovel and start digging. As Mathis dug in the ditch, Bobby overheard Locket say, "Someone has to go."
Oh, that's terrifying.
It's beyond terrifying. And just waiting and not knowing. And someone. Yeah. Stephanie was then brought to the hole that Mathis had dug, and Clayton shot her. When the gun jammed, Locket returned to the truck in an attempt to fix it, while Stephanie screamed for help. And the others would say later that they heard her screaming, knowing that he was about to fix the gun and go back and try again. And that's exactly what happened. After fixing the gun, Locket went back to the ditch and shot Stephanie again. While Mathis buried Stephanie's body, Clayton and Alfonzo warned Bobby and Summer that if they told anyone, they would be killed as well. At this point, the killers, Summer and Bobby, left the scene. They abandoned Stephanie's truck in a remote area, and then they all rode back to Bobby's house in the pickup, dropping off the infant, Bobby and Summer, at Bobby's house. The infant was with them, by the way. Again, the pair were threatened to keep their silence. The pair actually went to sleep that evening, but the following day, Bobby Bornt and Summer Hare told the Perry police just what had happened. The police proceeded to the location indicated by the pair, where they discovered Stephanie Neiman's pickup truck and her body. Arrest warrants were then issued for Clayton Locket, Shawn Mathis, and Alfonzo Lockett, all of whom were subsequently apprehended. The police interviewed Clayton Locket on 3 separate occasions. During the first interview, he ended the session and requested an attorney. However, he later chose to resume the interview. And in this interview, he denied shooting Stephanie Neiman. But in the third interview, he confessed to having killed her. For their involvement in the kidnapping and murder case, Alfonzo Lockett and Shawn Mathis are each serving life sentences. As the mastermind and the actual gunman, Clayton Locket was sentenced to the death penalty. Attorney General Scott Pruitt had this to say, quote, "When Clayton Locket chose to raise a shotgun and shoot 19-year-old Stephanie Neiman twice, he showed no mercy. When he ordered his accomplice to bury her alive, he showed no mercy. She begged him to spare her innocent life, and he showed her no mercy. For his actions, he was sentenced to death by a jury of his peers and now must face his punishment. The administration of the death penalty is a solemn duty carried out by the state. For more than 15 years, the state has worked diligently to see that the will of the jury is carried out and to ensure justice is served for Stephanie's brutal murder. The courts have ruled the state of Oklahoma has done its job to ensure these executions proceed by law. My thoughts and prayers are with Stephanie's family and friends and with the other victims of Lockett's repeated crimes. Regarding his sentence, victim Bobby Bornt said, quote, Clayton being put to death by lethal injection is almost too easy of a way to die after what he did to us. He will just be strapped to the table and he will go to sleep and his heart will stop beating. And he gave that quote to the Tulsa World paper. As Stephanie Neiman finally got some justice, this case was far from over. On February 28, 2014, the Oklahoma Attorney General's office presented a comprehensive report at Clayton Lockett's clemency hearing. Inside were details about Lockett's extensive criminal history and the disciplinary actions taken against him for his continued misconduct, such as making threats and throwing urine and feces at corrections officers who were delivering his meals since his murder conviction. Most notable were Stephanie's parents' statement. Susie Neiman's victim impact statement read as follows. Every day we are left with horrific images of what the last hours of Stephanie's life were like. Did she cry out for us to help her? We are left with the knowledge that she needed us, and we were not aware of it, so we were unable to help her. We go through the motions of living. We eat, we sleep. Steve goes to work and comes home again. We do what we have to do to make it through the day. And again, we exist, she said. Quote, we were left with an empty home full of memories and the deafening silence of the lack of life within its walls. We've moved, but in our new home, Stephanie also has a bedroom filled with her treasures and belongings. She also said that she and her husband will never know the joy of grandchildren because Stephanie was an only child. She ends her victim impact statement with these powerful words. Clayton Lockett made choices on June 3, 1999. Actions have consequences. It's time that he faces the full consequences of murdering our daughter, Stephanie. She deserves that. A jury decided Clayton Lockett's fate, and we believe it is time for justice to be carried out, finally. The day where Clayton Lockett would die for his crimes came on April 29, 2014. But it would not be a calm transition from life to death for this convicted killer. It was the first execution using Oklahoma's new 3-drug protocol, but left a nation wondering if this was just appropriate retribution or was it cruel and unusual punishment. The morning of his execution, Clayton hid under the covers like a scared child. When the officers knocked on the door of his cell in the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, Oklahoma, to get him ready for his execution, the 38-year-old Clayton Lockett flat out refused to get up as if they would simply go away. Clayton refused to be restrained by officers, and since he would not comply, it was agreed that he would be given an electric shock. The shock injured part of this arm, which meant the needle could not be inserted into this arm. Clayton completed his medical exam and x-rays as well as taking a shower at about 5:20 p.m. Clayton was then brought by a 5-member strap-down team into the death chamber. The room looked barren and sterile, with a gurney in the middle. A microphone hung down from the ceiling, and this would allow Clayton to make any final statement should he choose to do so. A phlebotomist spent over 50 minutes searching for a vein to insert a catheter. She made 2 unsuccessful attempts to insert an IV into his left arm. She then tried to insert it into a vein in his bicep, but that also failed. She asked for help from a doctor, Johnny Zelmer, who attempted 3 times to insert the IV into the jugular vein in Lockett's neck, without success. The doctor then tried the vein near Lockett's collarbone, which also failed. The phlebotomist came back in and then tried 2 veins in Lockett's left foot, but neither worked. Finally, Dr. Zelmer successfully inserted the needle into the femoral vein in Lockett's groin. At 2:23 p.m., the execution began by administering the first drug, which is a sedative. When he was unconscious at 6:33, the next 2 drugs were administered. The first paralyzes the body, and the second would stop his heart. They were all injected at this time. Just 3 minutes after Clayton was deemed unconscious, Clayton started to struggle and was able to speak, saying, quote, "Oh man, quote, I'm not," and according to some sources, quote, "something's wrong." He raised his arm in the air. At 6:37 p.m., Clayton even attempted to get up from the gurney, and he let out a deep exhale. 16 minutes into the procedure, the shades in the execution chamber were drawn, obstructing the media witnesses from observing all of this taking place. When it became clear that the execution was not working, deeming that Clayton had a vein failure, that was what they called it, the execution was halted at 6:56 p.m. At 7:06 p.m., Clayton Locket died on the table after suffering a heart attack. According to the Department of Corrections, the time for an inmate to be pronounced dead was 6 to 12 minutes. Clayton Lockett's execution took 43 minutes from start until he was pronounced dead. Due to all of this mishandling, I guess you could say,
Just
to
dead.
say slightly, the Department of Corrections demanded a full report to take place on how such a dreadful execution could have ever occurred. In it, a few things came to light. All drugs had, in fact, been properly administered. The problem, you see, was a piece of cloth and not continually checking the injection site. This is what happened, Jen.
So they used the proper chemicals. It just...
Human error, definitely, is what occurred here. Since the needle went into his groin, the vein in his groin, remember, a cloth was placed over that area to prevent the witnesses from seeing the nether regions, if you will. Now, what happened was sometime during all of this, the IV connection failed because the vein collapsed and no one bothered to check underneath the cloth. So due to this, Clayton Locket did not receive enough of the drugs to kill him, and they did not have enough of the drugs to continue, so the execution was stopped after 33 minutes. The report went on to state that prison officials considered taking Locket to a hospital, but failed to do so because then he died of a heart attack. Another man named Charles Frederick Warner, who was convicted of raping and murdering his live-in girlfriend, 11-month-old baby, in 1997, was scheduled for execution 2 hours after Locket with the same combination of drugs. However, the governor demanded a 14-day stay of execution to investigate. And now there's a lot going on there with that fella, like a lot, but I cannot imagine being just 2 hours away from being executed and then they come in and say, yeah, we're going to put you on hold for 2 weeks because something really bad happened with this guy.
Right.
Jen and I are thrilled to partner with Sleep Cream this year because honestly, it's an amazing product that both of us love. Ever since I hit that certain age, I've had problems falling asleep. I've tried over-the-counter products, but they always leave me feeling groggy the next day. But that's never a problem when I use Sleep Cream.
Now, Sleep Cream, it's not a drug, which you're going to need a prescription for. It's a cream that uses all natural organic oils and plant extracts. But the key ingredient is CBD. That's what allows your body to get what it's craving, a restful night's sleep. And don't worry, Sleep Cream doesn't have THC, so you're not going to get high, and it's not going to make you fail a drug test. Sleep Cream's CBD reacts to the skin's nerve receptors rather than going into your bloodstream.
So, if you're not sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night, like me, you got to go to sleepcream.com and try the original and finest CBD sleep topical on the market. All I do is put a bit on my neck and temples, maybe just 5 pumps or so, and that light lavender scent, which I absolutely love, helps calm my nerves. And before I know it, I'm getting sleepy.
Try it for a couple of nights and see how it works for you. I mean, if you're not experiencing a better night's sleep, Sleep Cream is going to refund your purchase. It's as simple as that. You don't have to return anything at all.
That's amazing.
So what do you have to lose except another night's of amazing rest? Order your bottle at Sleep Cream, that's CREME.com, and use code OTC Podcast, all one word, at checkout, and you're going to save $20 on your first order.
Seriously, go now. I cannot tell you enough. Go and order a bottle of Sleep Cream, that's CREME.com. Use code OTC Podcast, all one word, at checkout to save $20 on your first order. Anyone would agree that the lethal injection was not humane in this sense. And even the White House got involved, with Press Secretary Jay Carney stating, quote, "In this case, or in these cases, the crimes are indisputably horrific and heinous. But it's also the case that we have a fundamental standard in this country that even when the death penalty is justified, it must be carried out humanely. And I think everyone would recognize that this case fell short of that standard, end quote. For at least 2 weeks while the state officials were investigating, a couple things came out. This was the first execution using the 3-drug protocol, which the defense attorneys would denounce as experimental. And there's a lot to this. And if you listen to the podcast, I have a love-hate thing with the death penalty. Sometimes I agree with it, sometimes I don't. But the one thing that's really big is that they have trouble getting the drugs. That's why I didn't name them. I have the names. And sure, I can't say them correctly, but that wasn't all of it either. They
Right.
tend to change it up. A lot of times they get their drugs from Europe, who does not have the death penalty. And then when they figure out what America's doing with it, then they stop sending them. So kind of it's like a drug cocktail, but we just don't really kind of know what it is yet because it depends on who's going to give it to us. So it's a little sketchy, is I guess what I'm saying for all of that. Dina Parker, who was Lockett's aunt, gave the following statement to NBC News that she agreed with the White House's characterization of her nephew's death. Quote, "I wish they would have spoken up before all of this," end quote. This is a strange story. It's brutal. Stephanie, the poor thing, and he did come out and say the only reason he killed her is because she would not give up her keys, and that's why she was the one that had to go. He didn't know her. There was no reason for that. And I do think, I can't believe that they wouldn't look up on the injection site if they had done this before. But as we know, death penalty, lethal injections, I guess, however you want to say it, are not really truly administered by a doctor because of the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. So they have to get, I hate to say it, but, other people to do that, which
may be not qualified to
right.
do.
Or, I think that would, if something, I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV, but I would say if something seemed to be going amiss with it, I would think one of the first things you would do is check the injection site. He got part of the drugs. He got enough drugs to make him suffer, which Stephanie suffered as well. It's just, I think, as a government,
it's unnecessary harm.
Yeah, it's cruel and unusual is what it is.
Exactly.
And so,
that's horrible. It reminds me of like Green Mile.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's just, I don't know. There's so much to that. And you and I have talked about the death penalty. I think for some people, Clayton Locket totally did this. He admitted it.
Mm-hmm.
He went to court. The jury found him guilty. I have no problem with that. The problem I have with the death penalty is that socioeconomic wise, it doesn't play fair. If you're a poor person from the inner city, you're not going to get the same legal care that a rich kid from the county would, per se. It just doesn't play fair across humankind. So that's where I have the problem with it. But if you are an admitted killer, and you and I have talked about this, some people just cannot be fixed. It doesn't matter. And that Clayton Locket was only 23 when he did that. To me, that's still a baby.
And I looked him up real quick, like all the rapes that he just wasn't.
Mm-hmm. His cousin was 17 years old.
Yep.
Mathis and his cousin, the two accomplices, both came forward and said, why are we doing this? But they're serving life for their participation in it. Truly awful. So I just, that was the first execution be carried out since, I want to say it was 40 years. I thought I wrote it down, but I guess I didn't. His was the first to come back from that for all those years. So there was a reporter that did it's a timeline of everything, like by, and I'll put it in the show notes too, but giving the exact timeline until the shades were drawn. So they let these people see this. Like, could you imagine you're watching your child die slowly? The mom had, in fact, before this, inquired, is this going to be quick? Is it going to be instant? Is he going to feel pain? And they pretty much assured her, yeah. But the problem is it's not. And,
they go to sleep. They're sedated, so they sleep, and then they actually don't feel anything, but their body goes through. Well, ideally, from my understanding, anyway.
Ideally, that's how it's supposed to go. But so let's just say in the that crime class I teach, how I start out the thing is, and this is morbid, but gets us into talking about all this, is if you were sent to the death penalty, how would you like to die? And almost all of them choose this. And I was like, that's wrong. This is the most fumbled up one there ever was, because they mess it up all the time. And then the drugs kind of interchange of what they can use because it depends on what they get. I mean, it's just, there's been more messed up lethal injection executions than anything else. So it's just,
interesting.
again, where I have issues with it. But I've said a million times, if my child was injured by somebody, I don't think I could walk this earth knowing that they're still breathing. Even if they're in a little tiny cell, living a miserable life, they're still alive. And so I'd have that problem. I could go on and on about that. Remember, I wrote a whole episode on this, and we never did it just because it was interesting to me. He also, a little side note for this, his last meal, he wanted a really fancy steak, lobster, all this good food, and it went over the price limit because that several years earlier, they used to give them whatever they wanted, and this one guy ended up charging like $350 worth of food, and he didn't touch any of it. So they said, no, that's too much, but we can get you a steak from the Sizzler, which just made me laugh that they named the restaurant, and he declined, so he didn't have a last meal. So that is the poor story of Stephanie Neiman, bless her heart, and I don't know, that's just a lot.
It is a lot, yeah.
It's a lot to take. So
interesting.
I do a lot of research on the death penalty and all that stuff, and teens that are sentenced to death, and you know how that, I think it was in 2019, they turned that over and everybody had to be retried, and some of them still got death.
Even for life in prison, wasn't it? Or is it? It
was basically unjust sentences that would not be fair. So if you're 15 and you get sentenced to life, and in the United States, as we've talked about, the other country's life is not our life. Our life can legit be, you go in there and you come out in a body bag when you die. And you could be 95, 96 years old. Like the oldest living inmate in California, David Carpenter, is still on death row. And I cover him in that crime class. And I always have to check to see if he's still alive. And to my knowledge, he's still alive. And he's in his 90s, 95, 96, somewhere in there. He was the guy that killed women in Northern California in the parks. Actually, and then he killed a man too because they warned women. And so then he showed them. He showed them, and then he killed the guy, too. But anyway, there you have it.
Yeah, the death penalty one is hard, because there are some that I think totally deserve the death penalty.
Oh, totally.
But then you have to remove yourself emotionally from it, and that's difficult.
I think it would be interesting to be a juror on a case like this, because you decide their fate, and, you know, it's some horrible, horrible stuff.
Yeah, that's another thing I don't know if I could do.
I've been
on still live with myself. So
two juries. I loved it. I'm the big nerd that loves it. I
like jury duty too. I've never gotten a good case though. So
I did. I got two good ones. Oof, it was good. So anyway, speaking of jury duty, ask me what I'm watching, because this is a perfect segue.
What are you watching?
I watched Your Honor. I know I'm late to it. I loved Your Honor. And I think it ran initially on Showtime, and then I watched it on Netflix. Yeah. So good. So good.
Yeah,
I thought it was so good.
I started that a while back because our friend CJ from Beyond the Rainbow told me about it. And I started it, and then I just never got back to it. But it's good. And
it's slow. It's slow. I watched that first episode right when it came out, or half of the first, and then I was just like, ugh. But once you get, I would say like 2 episodes in.
Well, I love Bryan Cranston.
I love Bryan Cranston. And let me say, I told my daughter this since she died. I met him a couple times when I worked in the Hollyweird. The nicest guy.
No, I'm sure.
Nicest
he comes
guy.
across that way.
Yeah, he does. Great. And I just love him. I love his voice. I could just listen to that voice. He could read me the phone book in that voice. I'd listen. I'm telling you. I love it. I'm also currently watching BMF, which stands for This Is Right Up My Alley, Black Mafia Family. It's based on the Flannery brothers from Detroit becoming huge drug pins. Love the actors. It's really good if you like that kind of stuff. I like lots of characters. Having some trouble keeping who's who and who goes with what gang and all that, but just really well acted. And let me say, the main character, which is the main drug dealer, is actually the son of the drug dealer. And this was the first acting job, because it was introducing him. Blows me away. So he's the
son of the real character that the movie's based on, or the TV show's based on. Interesting.
Still in prison. He comes out in 2028, and then the little brother Terry got out in 2020, I believe. You know, I love the mob. I love any gang. I like anything that's just like that culture that like to get in their head. And so it like got me thinking, how does one rise to the top? Like, you have to be ruthless, but you also have to be smart, and you have to, you know what I mean? Like, how does it? And so it's all about that. It's pretty good. That is on Stars. Check that out.
I did watch one thing.
Which was?
Abigail. It's a horror movie.
Oh, was it good?
I enjoyed it. Matthew Crawley's in it.
Oh, QT.
Yeah, you can't, I don't even know his real name, do you?
No, but I know his face. And he was also in The Guest. I think that movie, The Guest.
Dan Stevens is his name.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Dan Stevens, that's it.
Yeah. But anyway, it's good. It's about some kidnappers that kidnap a ballerina.
Oh.
That's all I go into it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So should I watch it? And what channel is it on? I think
you'll like it. Peacock.
Okay, good.
You can stream it. It's a movie. I enjoyed it. My husband and I made my husband watch it with me because I saw the trailer for it and I loved the trailer. At first he watched it and he's like, yeah, this is good. For what it is, it's good. And then the next day he came back and he's like, you know what? I've been really thinking about that movie and I really like it.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's now Downton Abbey. I mean, it's a horror movie, but it's good. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Good. Well, I will be checking it out. What channel was it on?
It was on Peacock, or that's the app for the Roku, I guess, that's on.
Yeah, I got you.
Mm-hmm. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. It was fun. So,
okay.
Yeah. But that's all I can think of right now.
All right. Anything else?
That's all I know.
All right.
That's all I know.
I guess we will see everybody same time next week. But until then, remember, lock your doors.
Keep passing by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Love ya.
Today's episode was researched and written by me, Cam. For more information about this episode, as well as all the sources I used, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by hosts Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertesi from We Talk of Dreams. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from October Pod VHS. Our True Crime Podcast is executive produced by Nico Vertesi and Dick Bain. Make sure to like and subscribe to Our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter at Our True Crime Pod. You can email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. If you really like the show, make sure to check out our Patreon at Our True Crime Podcast. Our True Crime Podcast is an OTC production.